It was magic, every night of the summer, pure magic. This was ground zero for thrills, for memories, for excitement, for romance. This was the place, the pavilion, the amusement park.
For nearly 100 years, the oceanfront in Myrtle Beach was marked by a gathering place, not just for the locals who called Myrtle Beach home, but also for those who visited year after year. Hand in hand with the gleaming ocean, the pavilion attracted generation after generation to thrill in her delights, to come of age, and to create lifelong memories. Although the Myrtle Beach Pavilion Amusement Park was officially established in 1950 with the arrival of the Hustad Brothers Traveling Carnival, we can trace its general origins back to 1908. It was then that Burroughs and Collins Company, forerunner to the present-day Burroughs and Chapin, owned Myrtle Beach's first hotel, the Seaside Inn. Adjacent to the inn, they built a one-story wooden beachfront pavilion. It was completely encircled by a covered porch and was connected by a boardwalk. From a distance, it appeared to be round in shape, but it was actually constructed of many sides, each with an open window for cooling and ventilation. This pavilion also came with electric wiring, a first for the beach during a time when candles and oil lamps were the primary lighting source. It served as a social gathering place for the guests of the Seaside Inn and area residents.
Across the street from our house was something called the Annex, and it was a long building, and the upstairs had a lot of little rooms in it. That's where the orchestra boys stayed. And I grew up listening to them practice the saxophone and the trumpets and everything, and I got hooked on jazz right there. And then those boys, every afternoon at 3:30, would give a free concert over there in the down part of the pavilion.
In late 1923, the original pavilion was replaced with a new two-story wooden structure. It was built over the boardwalk on the southeast corner of 8th Avenue North and Ocean Boulevard. In addition to beach and social gatherings, it was used for conventions and conferences. It was here that shag, our official state dance, found its roots in the dance crazes of the era, the jitterbug and lindy hop. In 1938, this pavilion was enlarged and renovated. The gabled roof gave way to a more modernistic flat roof and squared sides. By the early 1930s, during the summer season, amusement rides had become a fairly constant presence there. Traveling carnivals would set up and offer a variety of amusements, including kiddie rides, a Ferris wheel, and carousels. In 1944, this pavilion burned to the ground.
We were living on 16th Avenue at that time, which is about 3 or 4 blocks up from here. And I can remember my father was on the volunteer fire department for the city of Myrtle Beach, and he got a call, and we went out in the yard, and you could see the sparks because the pavilion, the old pavilion, was wooden. And it had an upstairs where they had a floor show, and it was totally engulfed in flames. And by the next morning, it had burned down to the ground.
Due to World War II and the continuing shortage of building materials, work on replacing the pavilion was not begun until 1948, and it opened to the public in 1949.
During the Second World War, out front here was a watchtower that was in front, and they used it to look for the German subs out off the deal out there. And it stayed there until, I guess, Jimmy Lawrence, when they built the new pavilion, it came down sometime. Right. But Carrie Lou Montgomery used to sit and watch and look at night for freighters being sunk out at the sea.
The new two-story pavilion was designed to withstand winds up to 150 miles per hour and was constructed with port-in-place, reinforced concrete walls, the first building of its kind along the Grand Strand. Indeed, when Hurricane Hazel devastated Myrtle Beach in 1954, the pavilion was one of the few oceanfront structures left intact.
So when this big monstrosity was built, we thought Myrtle Beach would become big time.
Oh, yeah.
We thought it was big time. We had something nobody else had.
But it's always been a meeting place for people that came to Myrtle Beach. You'd see people coming to town with chickens in a basket, you know, the dogs hanging on to the car, going down, staying at that time you had boarding houses rather than hotels.
To coincide with the reopening in 1948 of the rebuilt Oceanfront Pavilion, the old Myrtle Beach Farms Company, descendant of the original Burroughs and Collins Company, wanted to create a more permanent entertainment venue at the beach. Company officials, while attending the annual Tobacco Festival in nearby Conway, spotted a small traveling carnival called the Hustad Brothers. Negotiations pursued, and the carnival was signed to begin performing at the beach in the dirt lot directly across from the new pavilion building. By 1950, Myrtle Beach Farms bought out the Hustad Brothers and enlarged the park by adding 14 new rides and concessions. What began in 1948 as a small enterprise on a patch of dirt grew over the next half-century to become, at its peak, one of America's most beloved oceanfront amusement parks. For nearly 50 years, until its closing in 2006, generation after generation of families came to the beach, and going to the pavilion was a family tradition where wonderful memories were made year after year.
If you came to Myrtle Beach and didn't go to the pavilion, you felt like you hadn't really done Myrtle Beach. So it was the highlight of everybody's vacation.
Well, they used to have a wooden roller coaster, the merry-go-round, pipe organ. Of course, you had to have bump cars. All your relatives would come down because they wanted to come to the pavilion. They loved to come stay with you.
But the pavilion also touched the lives of those who called Myrtle Beach home. It was both literally and figuratively the center of town. The old Pavilion Dance Hall, which later transformed itself into the Magic Attic, attracted locals and visitors alike to its vaudeville shows, beauty pageants, and rock and roll shows.
Everyone that lived here, that came here, this was the social center of the universe for all of us. Not only the social center in the summer, but the social center in the winter. This is where we came for entertainment in the winter. It might be wrestling, it might be magicians, it might be big ballroom dancing, it might be a South Carolina pageant.
Back in those days, Earl Hustad was the manager, and he would book a lot of free acts over the ocean, would have the Flying Walindas, tight wire acts, all types of things like that, and it was a lot of fun. One of the things that I remember from that era was, you know, it was in the 60s, everybody had long hair, but to work here, you had to be clean cut. We had to wear a tie to work, and Earl Hustad was a great man to work for.
From 1948 until his retirement in 1989, the Myrtle Beach Pavilion was managed by Earl E. Hustad. Under his guidance and oversight, the amusement park grew into an 11-acre complex made up of thrill rides, games, concessions, performance stages, strolling clowns, and performers.
The entire time that I worked here, I never ever heard anyone say anything bad about Mr. Hustad. And in fact, there would be often times when I would see him walk across the street and mingle with all of the employees, the individual ticket takers, the individual young people that were actually maintaining the rides.
We got along really, really well. And I had some serious illness in my family one summer. And I told him I needed to take off a few days to go to New York to visit some sick family. So he just put a little something in my pocket like this, and he balled it up and put it in my pocket like this, and was $300 bills. And he said, well, when you get there, and you call me and you come back as soon as you can. And so we did that for years. I think I stayed there at the pavilion for about 25 years.
Mr. Hustad entertained the public and the tourists by bringing in vaudeville shows. The vaudeville entertainers from New York, of course, would travel the ocean highway from New York to Miami, and then they would stop over in Myrtle Beach and they would perform at the ballroom upstairs in the pavilion, as it was known in the 50s.
Always considering himself an old carny at heart, he was most proud of maintaining the Pavilion Amusement Park as a place for good, clean fun, a place for families.
Earl Hustad was the grandfather of the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. He watched over all of us, and I think he still is.
Each summer for over 50 years, the Myrtle Beach Pavilion and Amusement Park was mostly staffed with the youth of Myrtle Beach. Impressionable young men and women who operated the rides, rented swimsuits, and manned the lifeguard chairs. Working at the pavilion was exciting times, and the old memories of first jobs, first loves, and fast dancing are well-worn, treasured stories.
My career began the first day in Myrtle Beach. After hitchhiking down here from Greenville with two little friends, as we crossed Ocean Boulevard and ran into the pavilion, they ran immediately to the ocean. I smelled a familiar odor like photographic chemicals. I ran over to the corner to the photo booth and I asked if they needed any help. And the man said, "Can you pick up those props?" And I said, "Well, yes, sir." I began working immediately. I didn't see the ocean until the next day.
Well, when I first started here today, I was what they call a beach monkey, which that's a person that sets up the umbrellas and chairs and floats, and then when the time runs out, you got it for an hour, I had to go chase them down and tell them their time was up, bring it back in.
When I first started working at the pavilion, it was back in 1962. My first job was taking care of the ladies' bathroom. And so about a month later, Mr. Houston looked at me, he said, "Rosa," he said, "I think you can make me some money behind that grill, fixing me some corn dog and hamburger and stuff." So I said, "Yeah, I could." So he said, "Well, okay, I'll see you about that." So the next morning I went to work. He done switched me over to food service without saying anything, you know. So, so I didn't say nothing. So he said, well, you think you can like it? I said, yeah, I like it. Anything to get out of the bathroom.
He handed me a mop and a bucket and some like rubber gloves. He said, "You follow me." So I followed Mr. Hustad, and we went to the restroom. And he said, "You start off when you're working for me cleaning the restrooms." And I said, "Well, Mr. Hustad, I understand what the mop is all about in the bucket. Now, what are the rubber gloves for?" He said, "That's what you pick the trash out of the urinals with and keep those clean."
Well, I was 15 years old, wanted to work at the beach. Amazingly enough, my parents said, "Okay, yeah, you can do that." Came down here, and I knew some of the guys that were working here at the Magic Attic. Back then, it was just the Myrtle Beach Pavilion Dance Hall. So they gave me a job, minimum wage, tearing tickets, and didn't have a license to drive at night. So a friend of mine and I rented a room on 8th Avenue. Actually, it's on Flag Street over there at the Welcome Mat, $7 a week.
We served hot dogs, we served hamburgers, we served grilled cheese, French fries, onion rings. I was really not supposed to be cooking because I was still in high school. But Damon and Buddy, they'd like to loaf every now and then, so they would give me the cooking utensils and let me cook the hot dogs and hamburgers.
We had one assistant manager that we played tricks on. We used to be able to park straight in here at the Pavilion, and he had a little white Corvair and would put a little smoke bomb on his spark plug. So when he pulled out, it'd explode, and everybody come running over there. They think his car was on fire, and he'd get out and come back, threaten to fire everybody would scatter. But it was just things like that that made it a fun job, and of course we worked hard too.
We worked 7 days a week, never had a day off. We got $1 per hour for working, but $1 per hour was money then. We needed the money, and Mr. W.E. needed the help.
Mr. Yo was in charge of the rides, and I said, well, where do I find a track stretcher? And they said, well, go ask the fella down there running the merry-go-round. Well, you go all around, and they keep sending you, and you asking for the track stretcher for the roller coaster. And somewhere along the way, it dawns on you that there is no such thing. That's part of the initiation rites.
Working together as a team made all the difference in the world. If you work together as a team, you can accomplish anything, and that's what they taught us down there. Mr. Houston was a very easygoing man that you know, made sure that everybody was taken care of. You got paid that $1 an hour, and that's what we got paid, $1 an hour, and you work 7 days a week. And it makes a difference in your life if you learn from these things. And so it helped me throughout life.
In Labor Day, when the bathhouse was shut down and the pavilion was shut down, literally Ocean Boulevard became a ghost road. Yeah. You could drive down it at night and it was pitch black dark. Some of our friends used to race.
Some people used to, I was going to say, I know a guy used to race down there.
For a teenager coming of age, the heady combination of a sandy beach, good music, and hot dancing is the essence of living. While there were a few other places on the Carolina coast that offered this trio of life's necessities, none were as popular as the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. Moonlit nights, 45 records playing on the jukebox, and every week a new migration of out-of-towners mixing with the locals. It was the birthplace of a dance called the Shag.
You could go down there and jitterbug. You could ask any girl anywhere to dance. It didn't matter if you had 2 horns sticking out of the top of your head or a long tail, they would dance with you. And when all the jitterbugs would come out to roost, their peg pants and their little skinny belts and their collars up, they were an attraction in itself. Thousands of people used to hang over the concrete overlook watching the dancers at night.
The memory that I think of most was probably when I was here in '58 with my friends, and we used to shag, fast dance, shag, with what we decided to dance with only the local boys rather than tourist guys, because we just figured that they would know how to dance. And to be sure, though, quite often we would make them show us what they did. And if they couldn't dance, we didn't dance with them.
It was fun because all the guys, of course, this was a new experience for them, and for me, I knew all the rides and where to go, and of course we snuck down the beach and made out.
I had a lot of good times, and some of the best times I ever had is, for example, being a lifeguard on the beach. You know, every week there was a new girl, and so you take it to the Ferris wheel, and you'd go to the photo booth, and you would show off, say, I work here at the Pavilion Museum, I'm a top dog, and you know, I'm a lifeguard, and this is wonderful. And it was an exciting time.
I met my wife here at the Pavilion. She worked at Skip's, I think, and there was a photograph place and
I remember that.
Yeah, and a candy place. So she was kind of hard for me to flirt with the other girls except the day she was off.
Two of the most sentimental and favorite attractions at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion are the carousel and the old German pipe organ. Dating back to 1912, the Herschel Spielman Carousel was brought to the Myrtle Beach Pavilion amusement park in 1950. While most carousels feature an assortment of horses, this carousel features a menagerie of animals. It has a 2-tiered floor with 16 jumpers, 11 standers, and an amazing 23 menagerie figures. of approximately only 15 working Herschel Spielman carousels in the country, this is one of the most elaborate and best kept.
Our carousel is called a menagerie. It's a mix of animals. Menageries were very popular at the turn of the century, but about the time of the talkie movies and the proliferation of cowboy movies, nobody wanted to ride giraffes and tigers and ostriches. Everybody wanted to be a cowboy and ride a horse. So there was the death of the menagerie, and there was born the carousels of the horse after horse after horse.
The hand-carved Ruth and Son Baden band organ was first seen and heard at the 1900 World Exposition in Paris. It's 20 feet long, 11 feet high, 7 feet deep, and weighs close to 2 tons. The music is produced from 400 pipes, 98 keys, and still operates with old-styled cardboard music. A favorite attraction for over 50 years, the German pipe organ arrived at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion in 1954.
And it was amazing to me how when the opening strands of the organ began, that people would just flock from all parts of the park. You know, you had children that were just awed by it. You had older couples that would sit and just listen to it, and you can tell they were reminiscing.
The organ is a beautiful thing to look at. It's a miserable thing to own. You know, you can't run down to the parts store on the next block and find anything to repair something that was made in Germany in 1900. We had a gentleman, he would come from Connecticut every spring and disappear behind our organ for roughly 3 or 4 days. He would come out from behind the organ, reach in his pocket, and pull out a little tablet, spiral ring paper, lick his finger, lick the end of his pencil, and write a number on it, rip it out and hand it to me. That would be how much I owed him. That was his official invoice. He would disappear, and we would see him again next year.
Officials signal that this will be the final season for a Myrtle Beach landmark. Good evening, I'm Richard Green, and this is Headline News, Local Edition. The Myrtle Beach Pavilion Amusement Park will open for the season on March 17th. When its season ends on or about September 24th, that will mark the end for the venerable attraction. Company officials say it is difficult for them to say goodbye.
Change is never easy. It is not easy for us to stand before you today to talk about the change we have announced, but it's necessary.
The announcement that Burroughs and Chapin Company was closing the Myrtle Beach Pavilion and Amusement Park was a difficult corporate decision to make, but a decision that was made necessary by a changing community and changing economy.
While many people will miss the tradition of the pavilion, some of those who might miss it the most work with B&C. Chairman of the board, Edgerton Burroughs, held his first job for Earl Hustad at the pavilion.
It's a tough day, but we will have better days. And now, change is always good. And there's one fellow that if he was here today, Earl Hustad, he would say you're doing the right thing.
For almost 100 years, Myrtle Beach and the pavilion went hand in hand. The history of one was the history of the other. But times have changed, making it hard to say goodbye.
There was a time in Myrtle Beach where everybody knew everybody. Everybody worked at the pavilion. You know, it's changed. Our community's changing. The pavilion site is 11 acres in the middle of probably 100 acres that needs to change. Our company, I hope, will be patient, not be in any hurry to do something on the pavilion site that may jeopardize what I call sacred ground.
While Burroughs and Chapin Company has gone to great lengths to preserve the carousel and German band organ, as of early 2007, they haven't announced their future plans for the site. It's hard to imagine Myrtle Beach without the pavilion, and equally hard to imagine the pavilion anywhere else. But a trip along Ocean Boulevard reveals the reality, an empty space filled only with the memories.
When the rides cranked up like a little sleepy dragon come spring, they took the axle grease off, we all started getting excited. Because that meant we were going to see thousands of people, but not only that, it meant our moms and dads were going to make a living. You had to make it in 3 months. When the water got warm, when the pavilion cranked up, we made a living.
The pavilion and the way it was run by the management made a difference in a whole lot of people's lives, not only here in Old Reed County, but all over this nation, really. I left home in 1956 and went to New Jersey. Well, I lived in Virginia while then I went to New Jersey. And people would ask me, where are you from? And I said, around Myrtle Beach. I said, Bucksburg, around Myrtle Beach. They said, well, we know where Myrtle Beach is. We've been to the pavilion. Everywhere you go, it was the pavilion.
But it was a highlight on Saturday afternoon to come to Myrtle Beach and to start off at 2nd Avenue Pier renting floats and enjoying yourself, and then after that drying off and cleaning up and going to Brandt's and having a 19-cent hamburger and french fries and a strawberry milkshake, and then coming to the Pavilion Amusement Park and just wearing yourself out. And on the way home in the back seat, you didn't have air conditioning, you didn't have a radio, so you just passed out from having such a good time.
But not all times are good. And in the summer of 1991, a tragedy occurred, the only blemish on a safety record that spanned the amusement park's entire history. And while the actions of one guest had a devastating effect on himself and others, the actions of the amusement park staff proved to be heroic.
In 1991, I was working that evening that they had the Ferris wheel accident. And it's an example of sometimes when things are at their worst, some people are at their finest. The pavilion staff reacted and I believe saved the situation until saved the situation until the firemen could get here. And yes, there were people involved in the fire department that were heroes as well, but you heard, I think, a lot more about the fire department than you did about how the pavilion employees reacted. And what a fine job they did handling the situation and just taking care of something that was just a terrible night for everyone.
Everything passes, and everything changes. And so the pavilion and amusement park closed its doors for good. September 30th, 2006 was the last ride. Tickets were sold out. People came from throughout the Carolinas and beyond. For one last time, you could experience all the sights and all the sounds of the Myrtle Beach Pavilion and Amusement Park. It was an evening of bittersweet fun and nostalgia. Memories made and relived one last time. One last scream of delight. One last smile. One last tear. One last ride.
I remember my dad bringing me and my brother down here to ride that merry-go-round, and I just had my very last ride on it. That was kind of sad.
The pavilion has always been a special place, and 34 years ago, my mother and father brought me here, and I rode this merry-go-round 34 years ago, and I wanted to come back one last time and bring my son and let him ride the same rides that I got to ride and relive the memories I had when I was a little boy.
I just felt like I had been here from almost the beginning, and I wanted to be here to close it up. It's kind of nostalgic, a little bit sad.
The Myrtle Beach Pavilion Amusement Park, I found out, was a tradition of the Carolinians, and no summer would ever be complete without that trip to the pavilion. When that happened, then summer could end, kids could get back to school, or people could do what they wanted to. But this was a tradition of long-standing. You know, it's been here for over half a century. I will miss it, really. I don't spend a lot of time here anymore, but I miss it. I cannot imagine this town, and when I drive down Ocean Boulevard and see the pavilion not here, I will probably shed a tear or three.
In my younger days, I longed for June to hear
Yes, it's so hard to say goodbye. So let's take just one more ride and blow a kiss, 'cause it's so hard to say goodbye. I learned to dance. It's been a lifelong summer romance. The seasons have changed and so did I. Every year I stop back by to relive those good times that were made in the park and in the arcade. And now my kids and their kids too all have sweet memories of you. You gave them, like me, the chance for a lifelong summer romance. Now it's so hard to say goodbye, old friend. I never dreamed these happy days would ever end. Yes, it's so hard to say goodbye. So let's take just one last ride and blow a kiss, 'cause it's so